Hello, and welcome to this week's podcast. I want you to picture your average leader. It can be anyone, a doctor, lawyer, CEO, politician. Just imagine what the average professional leader in the world looks like. Is it a man? If it is, you're not alone. Psychologist Tina Kiefer conducted an experiment where she asked people to draw a leader, and both men and women almost always drew men. She found that even when drawings were gender neutral, the language that was used to describe them was masculine. And while this may seem trivial, it has real consequences for women. Because we as a society have trouble viewing them as leaders, they're not who we look to for leadership roles. And often women experience backlash effect where they're penalized for trying to assert themselves as a leader in the same way as a man might. But it's not just in leadership that we default to male. The default male is prevalent in all aspects of our society. We have this tendency as a society to view the human experience as male by default. The experience of females is often an afterthought, and unless otherwise stated, male is assumed. This is problematic when you consider that females make up half of the population. Caroline Criado Perez points out in her book Invisible Women that we can see the default male when we think of language. Have you ever walked into a room filled with half guys and half girls and said, "Hey ladies"? Maybe not, but you've probably walked into a room filled with half guys and half girls and said, "Hey guys." In Spanish, you use the feminine verbiage if referring to all girls, but as soon as a single man is being referred to, you switch to the masculine verbiage. A study of the world's print and broadcasting media in 2015 found that only 24% of our news, television, and radio features women. In 2022, it's becoming more and more clear just why representation is so important. It's important for people to see themselves in media, in politics, in high-level professions. It's empowering for women, and it also paves the way for women leaders to be more and more normalized. And when women make up half the population of the world, why would them being in high-level positions not be normalized? Also, the assumption that the human experience is based off of males leads to a failure to account for women's needs in a plethora of areas. Data that specifically looks at gender differences and seeks to research where are areas of need for women is not collected. And failing to have this gender disaggregated data and thus being able to make policies around the needs of women can be harmful, especially considering that women are the gender more susceptible to being victims of sexual violence, having lower incomes, and being in less positions of power than men. Carolina Criado Perez points out a way in which we can see this failure through bathrooms. By municipal codes, bathrooms are forced to be the same sizes in square foot. So why then do we continuously see men going in and out of the bathrooms while women wait in long lines? Because more facilities can be put into the same amount of space for men because they can use urinals. Additionally, women are more likely to suffer from UTIs, have periods, are more likely to be accompanied by children or elderly people, are pregnant, making them take up longer times in the restrooms. If women's unique experience was studied and accounted for on greater scales, perhaps we would have bathroom codes which seek to attain equity for men and women rather than just giving them the same square footage. While the research on the default male is already out there, I thought this podcast could explore just how pervasive the default male is here at my liberal arts college. So on today's episode, I'll be asking random people on the street to describe random people. Let's get into it. I want you to think of the average politician.
Okay.
What clothes are they wearing?
Suit and a tie.
So you're thinking of a man then?
Yeah.
I want you to picture the average professional leader.
Thinking of someone who has courageous qualities,
Okay.
who's brave.
Okay.
When I think of a leader, I think of someone who's tall. I don't know if that really makes sense.
Okay, so be honest with me. Did you picture a man?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What do you think a CEO should look like?
I think a CEO should look professional.
What do you think they would be wearing?
If they were a man, they'd be wearing a suit, and if they were a woman, they'd be wearing a pantsuit.
When you think of a leader, what do you think of?
I think some qualities that come to mind of a leader would be someone who's assertive, just very dominant in nature.
And would you say those are more masculine or feminine traits?
Unfortunately, I think that, the bias in my brain is coming from, thinking originally I picture like a man with those qualities and those, images, but you saying that brings it to light also that, there's some bias there in my answer.
Thank you. When you imagine the average person in your mind, what do you imagine?
I think the average person looks like somebody with probably a medium build, probably somebody who isn't afraid to be themselves, has their own unique traits.
Okay.
Probably has a couple friends, not a ton, but a couple close core friends.
Okay, and what physically, clothes-wise, do you picture this person looking like?
Similar to an Adam Sandler look with basketball shorts and a t-shirt.
So let me ask you this. When you picture your average person, you're picturing a man?
Oh, I was, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And
okay, so I want you to picture your average CEO. Have them in your mind.
Okay.
What are they wearing?
A suit.
A suit.
A suit and tie. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay.
Suit and tie.
So is it a man?
It could be a woman.
But did you picture a man?
Did I
initially?
Picture? Yeah.
Yeah, you pictured a man.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. I want you to picture the average doctor. What do they look like?
The average doctor is tall, older, with gray hair, and just an older individual.
Okay, and did you have a specific gender in mind when I asked you that question?
When I pictured it, it was a man with, short hair and some facial hair.
Okay, so you initially pictured a man?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. I want you to picture the average politician.
Okay.
What are they wearing?
They're wearing a button-down, slicked back hair, some pants.
Okay. And would you say that when you picture them, you think more of a male or a female initially?
Initially male.
Okay. Thank you so much. As we can see from our on-the-street interviews, typically when asked to describe the average professional leader, people default to male. Whether it be doctor, CEO, politician, or even just generally a leader, most people described a man. And I think this can be understandable to us through an understanding of the history of patriarchal values. For years and years and years, men were able to be in the public sphere and were able to take part in politics, in business, in commerce. They were able to be the breadwinners, whereas women were confined to the private sphere and they were confined to domestic duties. And so I think today we're seeing kind of the implications of that history of men being the breadwinners and women being confined to the domestic space, that women aren't who we look to as leaders. I think for me, conducting these on-the-street interviews, what I found to be the most eye-opening was that even when just asked to describe the average person, not the professional, not the politician, not the CEO, not the doctor, just the average person, we still saw people default to male. We even saw females default to male, even though their human experience is female. We still saw them default to male. And I just find that so captivating and interesting and so worth understanding the implications of. As I explained earlier, this isn't just an issue of women not being thought of. It's an issue of when women aren't thought of, we don't think to implement policies which help them. This has real, tangible effects on women which are negative. And we have to understand the default male, and we have to think about how we can combat it in order to see those policies and those implementations which can make a better world for women. But the question remains, how do we fight the default male? Perez highlights in Invisible Woman that the default male does not only cause a gender data gap, but is a consequence of the gender data gap. If we as a society commit to better research surrounding women's issues and how we can address those issues, data won't universally be male, and thus the universal experience won't be assumed to be male. Thus, a really great place for us to start is to begin that research, to begin looking at women's specific needs and begin analyzing the experience of women and adjusting policies as such. And I think a really great place to start, as we talked earlier, is bathrooms. Men and women don't need equal square footage. They need equal access to sanitary bathrooms. And if that means women having more square footage because men can have more facilities and because men take less time in the bathroom, then so be it. Let's collect that data and let's figure that out. Let's address the default male head on. I would also personally argue that, especially in the United States, where we don't have universal maternity leave, strengthening our maternity leave policies so that women are in better positions to have a family while not being penalized professionally, as men typically are not, could have a huge impact. I think that this could lead to women being able to continue to work up the ladder professionally. They don't have to worry about choosing between a family or a career. They can have both, and they don't have to be penalized in their career for having that family. And in turn, this could shape how we view women in the professional world. Additionally, we need to make ourselves and others aware of these biases so that we can combat them. One really interesting thing about conducting these interviews was that people that I talked to did not realize that they had this bias. They did not realize that when they thought of a politician, they thought of a man, and they didn't realize how that equated to their general understanding of women as leaders. And through having these on-the-street interviews, I was able to kind of open their eyes to that. And we saw a couple of people be like, oh my gosh, I did think of a man, and I can't believe that that's my own bias. And so I think continuing to have conversations and continuing to make ourselves uncomfortable and learn about these biases can be really impactful. Leaders, teachers, politicians, peers, everyone in every aspect of life ought to be aware of these biases so that when women assert themselves as leaders or advocate for gender-specific issues, we do not have to worry about backlash that our male counterparts would not face. So I ask you, picture a CEO. I hope you considered a woman. I want to thank the Rollins College Political Science Department for sponsoring this podcast.